What would you do if the person you trusted most asked you to prove your love while secretly harboring a secret that destroyed your family? For Eliza Thornwood, the answer wasn't divorce or confrontation. It was a carefully measured dose of poison administered over months. But in this deadly game of secrets between husband and wife, nothing is quite what it seems, and the truth might be the most lethal substance of all. The crystal glasses clinked as Malcolm Thornwood raised his flute of champagne, commanding the attention of every guest in their luxurious Westchester estate. Outside, the autumn rain painted streaks across floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a view of Manhattan's distant skyline. "To 15 years with the most devoted wife a man could ask for," he announced, his gaze fixed on Eliza, whose smile never quite reached her eyes. "To passing every test," she responded quietly, taking a measured sip while maintaining perfect eye contact with her husband. The room of pharmaceutical executives and their spouses applauded politely, unaware of the layers of meaning buried in that simple toast. Malcolm's hand trembled slightly as he brought the glass to his lips. It wasn't the first time Eliza had noticed the tremors, which had begun 3 months ago, precisely according to schedule. As Malcolm continued his speech about loyalty and trust, Eliza's mind drifted to the morning 6 months earlier when everything changed. Malcolm had stood in their marble-finished bathroom, watching her apply makeup in the mirror. "Do you love me truly?" he had asked, his voice carrying that edge she'd come to recognize as the prelude to one of his tests. "Of course," she had answered automatically, having learned that any other response triggered his insecurities. "Then prove it," he had said, outlining his first demand. She would cut off contact with her male colleagues at the university where she taught chemistry. "If you love me, it shouldn't be a sacrifice." That was just the beginning. The tests escalated, checking her phone without warning, demanding she account for every minute of her day, requiring her to decline a prestigious research opportunity because it would mean traveling without him. Each demand framed as proof of devotion. What Malcolm didn't know was that Eliza had tests of her own, tests involving carefully measured compounds, tissue samples, and the slow, methodical documentation of symptoms. Tests that began after she found the encrypted files on his laptop, detailing the suppressed research on Neurogen 7, the drug that had caused her sister, Rebecca's heart, to fail. Now, mid-speech, Malcolm's words began to slur. The crystal flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor in perfect synchronicity with the gasp that erupted from the crowd. His body followed, collapsing in an ungraceful heap as the first violent seizure took hold. "Someone call 911!" voice shouted as the dinner party dissolved into chaos. Eliza knelt beside her convulsing husband, her hands steady as she loosened his tie. "It's all right," she whispered, though whether to Malcolm or herself wasn't clear. "Help is coming." As sirens wailed in the distance, Eliza discreetly slipped a small vial from Malcolm's jacket pocket into her own, the latest loyalty test he'd planned for her that evening. A sleeping pill he intended to secretly observe her taking. The irony wasn't lost on her. While guests panicked around them, Detective Valeria Reeves, who happened to be attending as the +1 of a pharmaceutical board member, pushed through the crowd. The detective's trained eyes narrowed as she observed the scene, particularly noting Eliza's composed demeanor amidst the chaos. Too composed for a woman whose husband was violently seizing on their imported Italian tiles. "Ma'am, when did the symptoms start?" Valeria asked, already shifting into investigative mode. "Just now," Eliza answered, her voice clinical and detached, "though he's been experiencing tremors in his hands for about 3 months. She paused, then added with practiced concern, "I've been begging him to see a doctor." As paramedics rushed in and lifted Malcolm onto a stretcher, Valeria caught a glimpse of something in Eliza's expression. Not fear or shock, but something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. The antiseptic smell of hospital corridors had become all too familiar to Detective Valeria Reeves over her 15 years with major crimes. But something about this case prickled her instincts differently as she watched doctors rush Malcolm Thornwood into toxicology screening. The preliminary blood work had raised immediate red flags, indicators of heavy metal poisoning, though the specific toxin remained unidentified. "Mrs. Thornwood," Valeria began, studying the elegant woman who sat perfectly poised in the waiting room, "you mentioned your husband had been experiencing tremors for 3 months. Were there any other symptoms you noticed?" "Irritability," Eliza replied without hesitation. "Paranoia, insomnia, I assumed it was work stress. The Neurogen 7 lawsuit has been challenging for the company." Her voice carried the practiced concern of someone who had rehearsed this conversation. Valeria made notes, watching how Eliza's manicured fingers twisted her wedding ring. "And your husband's tests?" "One of your dinner guests mentioned something about loyalty tests." A flicker of genuine emotion, was it anger, crossed Eliza's face before the composed mask returned. Malcolm has always been insecure. Recently, it became obsessive. As if on cue, Valeria's partner, Detective Marcus Holloway, appeared with an evidence bag containing Malcolm's phone. "You'll want to see this," he said quietly, showing Valeria a series of calendar entries titled simply E-Test. The earliest, dated 6 months ago, contained detailed notes. "Remove male contacts from phone, monitor response." The entries progressed alarmingly. "Cancel lunch with Professor Winters. Decline research grant. Sleep aid in wine. Observe if taken." Each entry meticulously documented Eliza's reactions, graded on a disturbing scale of devotion. While Valeria reviewed the phone, Dr. Santiago Oliveira approached, his expression grave. "Detective, Mr. Thornwood's condition is consistent with thallium poisoning, though there are anomalies. It appears to have been administered in small doses over months. Given the circumstances, we've contacted the CDC." Valeria glanced at Eliza, who remained perfectly still, her face betraying nothing. "Mrs. Thornwood, we'll need access to your home," Valeria stated, watching carefully for a reaction. "Of course," Eliza replied smoothly. "Whatever helps Malcolm." The Thornwood estate revealed a study in contrasts. Malcolm's home office contained the expected trappings of pharmaceutical wealth, awards, expensive furniture, a bar cart with top-shelf liquor. But it was the locked drawer in his desk that yielded the first truly disturbing evidence, a journal detailing every failure of Eliza's, every perceived slight, every time she'd shown insufficient devotion. Meanwhile, in the guest house converted to Eliza's home laboratory, "For my university research," she had explained, Marcus discovered something else entirely. Behind a false panel in a cabinet, a chemistry journal with meticulous notes on metallic compounds and their absorption rates, biological half-lives, and symptom progressions. "Valeria," Marcus called, his voice tight, "this isn't just poisoning, this is methodical research." As they photographed the evidence, Valeria's phone rang. Malcolm Thornwood had regained consciousness briefly, and in his delirium had whispered a single phrase before lapsing back into unconsciousness. "She knows about Rebecca." Back at the hospital, Eliza sat beside her unconscious husband's bed, her posture perfect even after hours of waiting. When Valeria entered, she looked up with those same unreadable eyes. "Your sister's name was Rebecca, correct?" Valeria asked without preamble. For the first time, Eliza's composure cracked, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible intake of breath. "Yes," she answered carefully. "She died last year, heart failure." "And did she take Neurogen 7 before her death?" Valeria pressed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as Eliza replied, "How interesting that you would ask that particular question, Detective. I wonder what else my husband has been saying in his delirium." The Thornwood home yielded its secrets reluctantly, like a patient under anesthesia fighting consciousness. In Eliza's laboratory, Detective Marcus Holloway carefully catalogued equipment while wearing protective gear, mass spectrometers, centrifuges, and chemical storage units far more sophisticated than standard university-issued equipment would justify. "Her specialization at the university is metal organic chemistry," Marcus informed Valeria over the phone. "Specifically, the interaction between metals and biological systems. The perfect background for untraceable poisoning," Valeria observed, watching medical staff adjust Malcolm's dialysis machine. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, hair beginning to fall, out in patches. Classic thallium poisoning symptoms, yet the toxicology reports showed molecular anomalies that confused even the poison specialists. At the pharmaceutical company headquarters, Valeria interviewed Lawrence Whitaker, CEO of Thornwood Pharmaceuticals, in his corner office overlooking the Hudson River. The wall behind him displayed the company's medications, including Neurogen 7 in prominent position despite its current legal troubles. "Malcolm is brilliant," Whitaker said, steepling his fingers. "The lawsuit is unfortunate, people searching for someone to blame for their family tragedies. All medications have potential side effects. Including fatal cardiac episodes in otherwise healthy adults? Valeria asked, noting how Whitaker's eyes flickered to the door, as if checking escape routes. Those cases represent less than 0.01% of users, he replied smoothly. Statistically insignificant. I wonder if Rebecca Collins would consider her death. Statistically insignificant, Valeria countered. Whitaker's practiced corporate smile faltered. I'm not familiar with that name. Eliza Thornwood's sister died after 3 months on Neurogen 7. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Whitaker reached for his phone. I believe this interview is over. Our legal team will... Valeria stood. Your legal team will what, Mr. Whitaker? Because right now, I'm investigating an attempted murder, not your company's liability issues. But I'm beginning to think they might be connected. Back at the hospital, Dr. Oliveira showed Valeria a puzzling discovery in Malcolm's latest blood work. The poison is transforming, breaking down into compounds that would appear naturally in the body during illness. In a week, there will be no trace it was ever administered. A self-erasing poison, Valeria murmured, designed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. In Malcolm's hospital room, they found Eliza reading aloud from a scientific journal, her voice steady despite her husband's deteriorating condition. She looked up when they entered, closing the journal calmly. Mrs. Thornwood, we found your research on metal organic compounds, Valeria stated bluntly, and the modified thallium formula you've been developing. Eliza's expression remained neutral. I'm a chemistry professor, specializing in metal interactions with biological systems. My research is published and peer-reviewed. And the hidden compartment in your lab, the journal documenting progressive symptoms matching your husband's condition exactly. For a long moment, Eliza was silent, her gaze drifting to her unconscious husband. Did you also find Malcolm's files, the ones detailing how they manipulated Neurogen 7 test results, how they identified fatal reactions in 3% of test subjects but buried those findings to fast-track FDA approval? She reached into her purse, extracting a USB drive. My sister was 32 when her heart stopped. No history of cardiac issues. Malcolm personally oversaw the committee that determined her death was unrelated to Neurogen 7. The monitoring equipment beeped steadily as Eliza continued, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. He came home that night and asked me to prove my love by wearing the perfume he bought instead of my usual one, all while knowing he'd signed the report classifying my sister's death as coincidental. Valeria took the USB drive, her understanding of the case shifting like tectonic plates. This doesn't justify poisoning, Mrs. Thornwood. Eliza's smile was cold. I'm not justifying anything, Detective. I'm merely providing context for what you'll find on that drive, and perhaps explaining why my husband became so obsessed with testing my loyalty. Rebecca Collins smiled from the photograph Valeria held, young, vibrant, with the same intelligent eyes as her sister Eliza. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 weeks before her death. The sisters stood arm in arm outside a research conference where Rebecca had presented findings on environmental toxins. She was the gifted one, Eliza explained, her voice softening for the first time since Valeria had met her. They sat in an austere hospital consultation room, the rhythmic beeping of Malcolm's monitors audible even through the closed door. I followed her into chemistry. She went environmental. I went metal organic. We were collaborating on a paper when she started having palpitations. The USB drive Eliza had provided contained a trove of internal Thornwood pharmaceutical communications, emails, test results, meeting minutes, all documenting a calculated effort to minimize Neurogen 7's cardiac risks. Malcolm's name appeared throughout, often as the decisive voice arguing against additional testing or label warnings. 3 days after Rebecca died, Eliza continued, Malcolm brought home a report. He didn't know I recognized her case number at the top of the page. He'd categorized her death as unrelated to medication, despite her cardiac enzymes matching the exact pattern they'd identified in their suppressed trials. Marcus entered with a tablet displaying footage from the Thornwoods' home security system. We found this reviewing the archives, he said grimly, from 5 months ago. The video showed Malcolm in Eliza's home laboratory while she was allegedly at a conference. He methodically photographed her research journals, equipment and chemical storage. He knew, Eliza said simply. That's when the loyalty tests escalated, not from insecurity about my fidelity, but fear I'd discovered what he'd done. As if on cue, Dr. Oliveira entered. Mr. Thornwood is conscious and asking for his wife. Malcolm Thornwood's appearance shocked even Valeria, who had seen her share of hospital bedsides. His hair had fallen out in patches, skin greyish and papery, eyes sunken but burning with awareness. When Eliza entered, those eyes widened in unmistakable fear. "You know," he whispered hoarsely. Eliza took the chair beside his bed with perfect poise. "I've known for 14 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, Malcolm, since you brought home Rebecca's case file." A recording device sat openly on the nightstand between them. Valeria made no move to hide her documentation of this encounter. "The tests," Malcolm began, "were to control me, Eliza. Finished. To ensure I remained isolated, dependent, unable to act on what I knew. Each time I passed a test, you created a more difficult one, knowing eventually I would fail and give you reason to discredit me." Malcolm's monitoring equipment beeped faster. It wasn't personal, the Neurogen 7 situation. It was business. 17 billion in projected revenue. Rebecca was one case. One case? Eliza's voice finally cracked. "She was everything to me. What did you give me?" Malcolm asked, fear naked in his voice. "A modified thallium compound of my own design," Eliza answered clinically. "Absorbed gradually through skin contact, primarily through your expensive hand creams. You insisted I apply to you each night as proof of my devotion. Poetic, isn't it?" Malcolm's breathing quickened. "You'll go to prison." Eliza leaned forward. "Will I? Your symptoms perfectly mimic those documented in your own suppressed research on Neurogen 7's long-term effects. The same. Effects you've had your team denying in court. And my compound is designed to metabolize into naturally occurring substances within weeks." Valeria watched this exchange with growing unease, the case transforming before her eyes from a simple poisoning into something far more complex, a chess game between equals where both sides had committed unforgivable acts. In the corner of the room, a small red light blinked on an air vent, a camera neither detective had placed there. Valeria noticed it just as Malcolm's eyes flicked toward it, and then back to his wife with newfound calculation in his gaze. "This isn't over," he whispered. Eliza's smile was glacial. "It never is with us, is it?" Lawrence Whitaker's arrival at the hospital created immediate tension. The CEO swept in with an entourage of lawyers and security personnel, demanding private access to Malcolm's room. Valeria intercepted them in the corridor, standing her ground despite being outsized by Whitaker's private security. "This is an active poisoning investigation," she stated firmly. "Nobody speaks to Mr. Thornwood without my presence." "Detective Reeves," Whitaker replied, with practiced corporate condescension, "Thornwood Pharmaceuticals has significant concerns about proprietary information Mr. Thornwood might disclose while under the influence of medication and duress." "Fascinating," Valeria countered. "I have significant concerns about obstruction of justice charges if you interfere with my investigation." The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas Blackwood, the pharmaceutical company's chief counsel, who whispered urgently in Whitaker's ear. The CEO's face hardened as he nodded. "We've just received word that federal agents have executed a search warrant at our research facility," Whitaker said coldly. "I assume you're involved in this coordinated attack on our company." "Actually," came a new voice from behind them, "that would be my doing." Sophia Jensen, Eliza's best friend, stepped forward, holding up a federal investigator's badge. "Sophia Jensen, FDA Criminal Investigation Unit. I've been building a case against Thornwood Pharmaceuticals for 18 months. The revelation hit Valeria like a physical blow. "You're undercover FDA?" "Eliza came to me after finding Malcolm's files on Rebecca's case," Sophia explained. "We needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed as a grieving sister's vendetta." Inside Malcolm's room, monitors beeped steadily as he drifted in and out of consciousness. Eliza sat beside him, her posture rigid as she addressed the assembled group. "I never intended to kill Malcolm," she stated clinically. "The dosage was precisely calculated to induce progressive symptoms that mimic documented Neurogen 7 side effects, the same effects his team has been denying in court." "You've admitted to poisoning your husband," Thomas Blackwood interjected. "That's attempted murder, regardless of your justification." "Is it?" Sophia countered. "Or is it the most comprehensive demonstration possible of a pharmaceutical company covering up lethal side effects? Eliza has documented everything: the chemical compound, the dosage, the progression of symptoms, creating an irrefutable parallel to the cases Thornwood Pharmaceuticals has been dismissing. Malcolm's eyes fluttered open, fixing on Whitaker with unexpected clarity. "They know everything, Lawrence," he rasped. "About the modified test protocols, the discarded results. Rebecca Collins wasn't an isolated case." Whitaker stepped forward menacingly. "You signed the same confidentiality agreements I did, Malcolm. Everything we did was legal. Suppressing clinical trial results that showed cardiotoxicity in 3% of subjects is not legal," Sophia stated firmly. "Neither is falsifying FDA documentation." As the confrontation escalated, Valeria noticed Malcolm's hand moving beneath his blanket, pressing something. Seconds later, his personal phone, which had been returned to him earlier, pinged with an incoming message. Valeria intercepted it before anyone else could react, reading the message from a contact labeled only "Contingency." "Package delivered. 30 minutes." "What package, Mr. Thornwood?" Valeria demanded. Malcolm's laugh was a dry, terrible sound. "Insurance. You think I didn't plan for this? Eliza wasn't the only one with a long game." Eliza's composure finally cracked completely, her eyes widening in genuine alarm. "What have you done?" "The same thing you did," Malcolm whispered. "Ensured mutual destruction." Sophia was already on her phone, barking orders to federal agents to locate the package and secure Eliza's laboratory. The hospital room descended into controlled chaos as security protocols activated. In the midst of this, Malcolm beckoned Valeria closer, his voice barely audible. "Check the air vent camera. Been recording. Everything since I was admitted, not hospital issue." Valeria glanced at the small red light still blinking in the corner vent, understanding dawning. This wasn't just a case of poisoning or corporate malfeasance anymore. It was an elaborate chess match between husband and wife, each move calculated years in advance, with pharmaceutical executives, federal agents, and now police caught in their deadly game. And somehow, Valeria suspected, they were still several moves away from checkmate. The package turned out to be a server upload. Every research note, every recorded conversation from the Thornwood home over the past year, automatically transmitted to media outlets nationwide. Not just Eliza's meticulous documentation of her poisoning methodology, but Malcolm's extensive records of psychological manipulation, the corporate cover-up of Neurogen 7 deaths, and the intricate chess game the couple had been playing. In Malcolm's hospital room, the monitors beeped with increasing urgency as his condition deteriorated despite medical intervention. "The compound should have been metabolizing by now," Eliza insisted, her scientific detachment finally crumbling into genuine concern. "The dosage was precise, meant to sicken, not kill." Dr. Oliveira entered with new test results, his expression grave. "There's a secondary compound in his system we didn't detect initially. It's accelerating the toxicity." "That's impossible," Eliza whispered. "Unless—" Her eyes widened in horrified understanding. Malcolm's lips curved into a weak smile. "Your hand cream," he rasped. "I replaced it months ago. Every time you applied my medication, you were absorbing a compound of my own design. Slower acting, but ultimately more thorough." The revelation stunned the room into silence. Malcolm continued, each word clearly costing him effort. "I majored in chemistry before business school, Eliza. Did you really think you were the only one? Who could research metal organic compounds? You've been poisoning me while I poisoned you," Eliza stated, the full weight of their mutual destruction becoming clear. "The perfect marriage," Malcolm whispered, "till death do us part." Valeria had seen many crime scenes in her career, but never one as perversely intimate as this. A husband and wife who had spent years secretly poisoning each other, each believing they controlled the narrative. The air vent camera, when retrieved, revealed yet another layer to the story. It wasn't hospital security, nor was it Malcolm's. It belonged to a third party. The federal investigation had been monitoring both Thornwoods, using their toxic marriage to uncover the larger pharmaceutical conspiracy. "We needed Malcolm's confession about Neurogen 7, Sophia explained, as medical staff rushed to begin treatment for Eliza's poisoning. "But we also needed to understand how deep the corporate cover-up went. Eliza provided us the perfect opportunity." "You used her grief over her sister," Valeria accused. "She approached us," Sophia corrected. "After finding Malcolm's files, she came to the FDA voluntarily. The poisoning plan was already formulated. We simply guided it toward gathering evidence rather than mere revenge." As both Thornwoods fought for their lives in separate hospital rooms, Lawrence Whitaker was taken into federal custody, the evidence from Malcolm's contingency package providing the final pieces needed for indictment. Thomas Blackwood, seeing the corporation crumbling, offered a plea deal, revealing the full extent of the cover-up, 17 deaths officially attributed to Neurogen 7, with potentially hundreds more disguised as unrelated medical events. In the end, it was Malcolm who succumbed first, his body finally yielding to the combined effects of Eliza's calculated poisoning and his own self-administered toxins. Eliza survived, though doctors warned of likely permanent neurological damage. At Malcolm's funeral, attended primarily by federal agents and legal representatives, Valeria approached Eliza, who sat pale but composed in her wheelchair. "Was it worth it?" Valeria asked quietly. Eliza's gaze remained fixed on Malcolm's casket. "Rebecca was worth it," she answered simply. "The other 16 victims were worth it. The hundreds who won't die now that Neurogen 7 is being pulled from the market. They're worth it. And the price you paid?" Eliza's hands trembled with the permanent tremors she would now endure for life. "You assume I didn't calculate that into the equation from the beginning, Detective." As mourners dispersed, Valeria noticed a familiar face at the cemetery's edge, Dr. Santiago Oliveira, watching the proceedings with particular intensity. When their eyes met, he turned quickly away. That evening, reviewing hospital records, Valeria discovered Dr. Oliveira's name on an unexpected document, Rebecca Collins. Original autopsy, where he had been the first to suggest Neurogen 7 as a potential cause of death, a finding later overruled by the committee Malcolm chaired. The case was officially closed, but Valeria couldn't shake the feeling that the final move in this deadly chess game between husband and wife remained unplayed, a contingency neither had revealed, waiting like a dormant poison for the perfect moment to complete its work.